Rodrigue does a phenomenal job covering the NFL and the LA Rams. She does great work. I mean, I think arguably the best feature writer in the NFL, and maybe I'm biased because I read it all the time and it's a lot of Rams-centric stuff. But this one, Jourdan, you kind of topped yourself in a way that really struck a lot of emotional chords with us here, which is why we were really happy that you could join us today. Now, you've been around Sean. We talked about the story, so the audience is kind of prepped on the story to some extent. At least we paraphrased through it. But you've been around Sean for a long time now, Sean McVay. How have you seen kind of like his evolution as a human being / coach in your time around him?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. First of all, guys, I saw I think at least half of you at the draft site the other week, so it was nice to see you guys in person. But I think one of the biggest gifts of being a beat writer is that you can watch change over long periods of time, and the biggest gift in that comes when you watch people change over time, and you can watch adults grow up essentially, or grow into another version of themselves. And sometimes it's a negative thing and eventually turns positive. Maybe it never does. Sometimes it starts really positive and then they stumble and they fail or they hit adversity, and you get to, if you care, you get to truly never leave them in any one moment, just continuing to document and observe the human condition and the human timeline. And so I think that with this story, it was special because this is a person in Sean McVay who I don't even really think he realizes how much he's helping people by the fact that he's living his journey very publicly. And it's not always perfect, and it looks perfect at times, but it most certainly isn't. And this story illustrates that, and other articles I've written about him have. But he works at it, and he tries to get better, and he tries to see where he's failing himself and failing others and failing, whether it's family or assistants or players or himself. Even if no one else sees it, he tries to address it. And so I think that was what impacted me and what was special about the story. And what I know Sean to be as a person by now, after all these years of covering him, is this is a person who is like publicly living a very human journey despite all the glory and the fanfare surrounding him.
Jourdan, I was telling George earlier today, I mean, I literally welled up. I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this, mostly because Chris Peterson was an important part of my life early, when I was a young guy playing football in college. So I kind of got a little bit of that wisdom when he was young, but I'm curious, we would never know this incredible story if you don't write it and publish it. But how does someone in your world come about knowing about stuff like this? It's so interesting.
I'm so glad you asked me that question, and it must be why you're wearing the sunglasses now. You don't want anyone to see you crying.
Well, Jourdan, on Tuesdays we wear sunglasses.
No, we don't. We use too many people.
Me and Chris wear sunglasses on Tuesdays. Part of the gig. You know what I'm saying?
I love a good bit. But with this one, I happened to almost accidentally catch Sean on one of the worst days of his life, when they had just lost to Kansas City, and that was a game he had given up play calling. His grandfather had just passed away. He was right in the middle of the decision, really, at that time, of whether or not he was going to take a break. He had been offered a break by members of the executive council, Kevin Demoff and Les Snead. This was a very serious issue, and I happened to notice that he was not calling the game. And so I sort of found him after in the tunnel, and the Kansas City stadium is set up to where it's like this concrete like bowels of the stadium. And I just happened to, with the help of Artist Twyman, find him because I wanted to ask him if he had indeed given up play calling for that game. I didn't want to ask him on the podium because I understand this is a sensitive topic, and what would that have been aggregated into perhaps if he had said, no, I didn't call this game, without any more context, right? And so I asked him, and he wasn't okay. And so later that off season, we talked at length about all the reasons why at that time he wasn't okay, and his decision to come back into coaching, and the people in his life who had stood by him and had stood up for him when he needed them, and the people that he had turned to and who inspired him, and the help that he was seeking. And Chris Peterson's name came up in that group. My flare went up because Chris Peterson is a very significant figure in my own football journey from afar, somebody who inspired me as a young girl watching the Fiesta Bowl to get into football in the first place. And the audaciousness with which he coached, and the steeliness and the passion and the culture, and like, this was a fairy tale in real life, right? So how could anyone not love football after watching that? And somehow it just came to be that Chris and Sean had connected with each other. So I knew something special was unfolding between these two people, and some special conversations were happening. But it was very clear to me that that was supposed to be private. So I kept it private. But I feel like if you're going to write the first story about the person who's having their worst moments, you have to write the second story about what happens next, right? The person who refuses to stay in his worst time, and the person who really does the work and genuinely works to get better, to improve, to be more authentic, to really understand what it means to be a human, a coach, a connector, a leader, the way that Chris Peterson always has been. And Sean was doing the work. I was there every day. So it's like, you can't hide from it. We beat writers, we're there. We're lurking everywhere. You cannot hide. You watch the work happen in real life. I watched his teams become more resilient. I watched him be more authentic with people. I watched him be more authentic with his coaches, with his players of all walks of life, age, all talents, abilities, whether they had it or not. Watched him work with less in a more dynamic and productive way. Watched him pour back into members of the organization who had quietly had his back for so many years without him even knowing. And I'm like, that guy did the work. He's doing the work, and he knows there's no present or past tense. It's just ongoing. And so this spring, I knew that they were still talking with each other. I knew that Chris Peterson was potentially planning on coming out to Los Angeles for a little while. I also know that Chris Peterson is extremely private and would not want to talk about this publicly without Sean's permission. So I asked them both if I could tell the story. And so it's been a story years in the making, but I truly believe that there had to be another part to Sean McVay's story, and there is, and there was.
Jourdan Rodrigue of The Athletic. Again, it's a fantastic read. If you haven't had a chance to read it on The Athletic, you should. Jourdan does phenomenal work there. And now a couple of other things that stood out to me. Now, we've had Sean on here usually a couple times a year. He'll come on this show. He does Mason and Ireland regularly during the football season. But every time, we've talked to him, we try to loosen him up a little because, he, as you know, he can get very much into coach speak mode. So
yes.
we try to, throw him some curveballs. But really what stood out to me, I'll never forget, he went on Jay Glazer's podcast, and he talked about the gray days was the way he phrased it. And I remember Glazer actually used the phrase, and Sean's response was, and I know you wrote about this and you documented it, and he's like, you get those too? And it really was this very open conversation on this podcast. And then the next time he came on shortly thereafter, we had kind of those conversations with him. And I really feel like another turning point for him beyond what you wrote, and you mentioned this as well in this recent story, was fatherhood. I think that really was a moment in time that's changed him in a big way. How have you kind of viewed him post-fatherhood in regards to what he's able to do in his daily interactions at work?
Yeah, I think he puts things to the side. I wouldn't say easily. I don't think it's ever going to be easy for him to compartmentalize. But like I kind of mentioned before, I think he works at it. I think he works really hard to separate now the things that go on throughout the course of his day in football and the very real moments and experiences that he's having with Veronica and JJ as they continue to, be a family and as JJ's growing up. And so I feel like that also, I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine that for any human being who becomes a parent, that takes practice and dedication and a willingness to look inward at where you need to show up for people. And so that's what I think. All of this, to me, really goes hand in hand. I think the universal timing of, them growing their family coincides with the fact that he was starting to get better. And I do think that as a person who's been around him, obviously I would never speak for him in that regard. But it is interesting because you see this constant self-reflection that he's always had more in an analytical sense, troubleshooting, game planning, chess maneuvering, all of that. But I think there's a lot of that happening, who is he as a person? Who is he as a father? With the second he closes the car door, when he pulls into the driveway, like that's, is to signal, shut all of the rest of that off and be present and be a dad. And I think for a lot of parents that has to resonate. Certainly I know it's been incredibly life-changing, impactful for him.
Yeah, and Jourdan, I think the one thing I took away, I mean, a lot of things, but one thing in particular, Peterson, when he's in college, the way the story goes and the way you told it was that he's not walking into meetings with coaches and breaking down X's and O's and talking about, what they're planning on doing on offense and defense and kicking game. It was very much personal. He wanted to know everybody. He wanted to be, it sounded like a mentor to his assistant coaches. And it sounds like Sean has kind of adopted that with his coaching staff too. Did I get that right from your piece?
Yeah, and I think more so in a way that's not about solving problems and finding answers to tests and then like taking all of that information and like huddling in your office by yourself and like one or two trusted confidants and like building a game plan. Like the door stays open now. I mean, there are more people going in and out of that office. There are more instances where like he's openly lamenting the new layout of this new temporary facility because his office is too far away from the cafeteria. So it's like, this is a new kind of thinking for him. It's not like he was separate. He was always very well connected with his players. His coaches always had such a tremendous amount of respect for him. But I will tell you guys this, and this has been, I think, one of the biggest signals for me of a transformational shift. I think a lot of the coaches that have had success, and there have been so many that have gone through this system and that have had success elsewhere, I think so many of them have been so successful, not only because of their own merit, but also we know the Sean McVay effect. We know that proximity also gives people a bump in this building.